Hey, what's up, everyone? So, I recently started playing Humankind, and I have to say, it is a pretty amazing game, I think. So, let me go ahead and talk about mostly its comparison to Civilization, since I think that's where most people are probably going to be coming into this game from. Though, other 4X game players probably want to hear about this as well. So, I'll try to also throw in some broad statements as well to maybe mix it up a bit and demonstrate a good understanding to everyone so that everyone can kind of feel like they know whether or not this is a game that they might want to try or a game that they want to pass up this time. But yeah, with that said, if you kind of enjoy game reviews or you find this valuable at all, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. I do game reviews often, and I would love to do more of them. So if you put some suggestions down in the comments, I'll try out those games and I'll release a review of those as well. But let's start talking about the game. So first of all, I think that its initial impression on you is going to be huge because it kind of lets you put your own uniqueness and your own self into the game by creating your own character, which is, I think, a really good start to a game because it already makes you feel like you're part of the world. At least it did for me, and I believe that I'm sure I'm not alone in that, since it's a very common thing where in RPGs you feel much more connected to the world and you have much more of an emotional connection to the game because you have kind of cemented yourself as something within the game. Now, that's a fairly minor thing, just allowing custom like character creation and then letting you put that character in the game is minor, but the thing that facilitates that in this game, unlike Civ 6 or other Civ games, you don't pick a civilization to start. Instead, you pick a civilization as you go through each era and as you progress through each one. And that allows you a really high level of dynamic change to your gameplay as you go throughout the game. Whereas in Civilization, if you say pick a merchant-like person at the beginning, then it becomes kind of difficult to transition into, say, a military or a science or a culture person towards the end. And so in this game, if you do decide that in the mid game you're like, nah, I kind of think I want to be more aggressive here and go to war more, you can just switch to a civilization that has stronger warriors or has a better structure, whether that be their bonus or their building or their unit for going to war. And you can just change your strategy kind of on the fly in a way. Like to state that the amount of minor details in this game add up very, very quickly. So, for example, there's a lot of verticality in the game, and that verticality lends well to not only battles, but kind of discovery. And that's something that Civ, I think, doesn't do very well, is they do have like impassable terrains and stuff like that. But in this game, you really are kind of incentivized to look for high ground. And I think that's a very, very good way of kind of creating a more dynamic battle system within the game, because their battle system is going to be it's just better than Civ's, where in Civ you have your units and then you kind of just attack one by one. This is kind of similar, except for in this game, when you start a battle, you have a deployment zone, and then within that battle you can either choose to retreat, you can use the terrain to your advantage using vision and getting some good attacks in that way, and you can also chase the enemy around. So it's a little bit more dynamic in that sense. I wouldn't say it's significantly more dynamic, but it does add kind of an element of strategy to the battles that Civ doesn't really seem to have. And that can all be experienced like very early on in the game, because you start off in basically the Stone Age, and from there you can fight animals, you can fight other people, and you can already get the sense of, do I want to start pressing kind of a military advantage, or do I want to sit back, start going to get some other things like some more science, some more culture, some more food to build up my units a little bit? You can kind of make those decisions very early on based on the start you have. And I think that is very, very interesting. And another thing that this game does that I think is better for the game overall is in Civilization, if you want to create a new city, you really have to plan for it to a kind of almost an extreme level, where you have to create the settler. You have to know where that settler is going to go, because you have to protect them all the way to their location. Otherwise, they can get taken by enemies. And then once you're there, then you just create the entire city from the start, and then it expands outward. In this game, the map, once it's generated, is also divided into these territories. And any unit you have, you can send into one of those zones and place an outpost. Once it's an outpost, it does give you some things like, culture or food, or it gives you some of those things, but it's not a city yet, and it isn't treated like a city in any way. It's very easy for it to be destroyed by other players. It doesn't really provide much other than the fact that you can still use it for creating, say, a mine or something like that. But what it does allow you to do is either allow that post to be absorbed by another city that is in an adjacent territory, or to found your city on that outpost by itself. And what this does is it already defines the areas in the game. So people going in can kind of see what the area already holds, if they want that area. And I would say in a good way, it simplifies the game from Civilization, where in other ways, as I'll talk about later, it's going to complicate it. I already did talk about the combat, which is one way that it complicated the game a little bit differently than Civ does. And I think both of these are strong indicators for the design and the development of the game, is the fact that they know what things worked within Civ, what things didn't work, and what things need changed. I think the combat was a major thing that needed changed within Civ. And I never thought about the founding of cities being changed, but I do think from my limited play of this game that is a good change. Now, keep in mind, I only have about 15 hours into this game, so of course my experience with it is going to be much different than somebody who has, say, 100 hours into it. But to put that into perspective, for Civilization 6, I have 120 hours, and then for Civ 5, I have 130 hours. So I do have some time played into games like this. I'm by no means an expert, but I do kind of see where these things lend well to not only new players, but they can actually be a really strong indicator for how this game might play out for experienced players. For example, if you're an experienced player in Civilization, you know basically when to create a settler and when to found a city. And you'll plan for that to probably an extreme degree usually. Or maybe you've intuited it, or you have like a very basic general strategy you go for at the beginning, but later in the game, founding a new city is kind of an ordeal. However, in this game, because of the way it's easy to use combat units to create a new outpost and from there create a new city, as an experienced player, it gives you a lot more flexibility. And I can see how this as a new player is better for the system because you're not frustrated kind of getting your unit stolen. But as an experienced player or somebody who wants to do this in any kind of competitive way, it really kind of means that you're able to take your advantages to the extreme. Because if you look at other strategy games, and I'm going to go outside the 4X area a little bit, if we look at other strategy games such as StarCraft, what experienced players will do is they will start scouting out. And if they see something that their opponent is doing that they can counter with a different thing than they are currently doing, they will switch their strategy immediately. They will stop building the units they're building. They'll stop producing the buildings that they're making, and they'll switch that on the fly. And that's something that facilitates well in an RTS because of the way that building and cancellations and units kind of counter each other and how that stuff works. They've kind of lended that into this game a little bit, where you don't have to hard commit to the creation of a city like you would in Civ. In this game, you could maybe go say like, oh, I want to put a city here. And then you go over there and you see like you're surrounded by enemies or something. You're like, maybe I don't want to actually do that. Maybe I would rather go over here, or instead, maybe I'll go attack them first and then take that area. I think it lets you do a lot more with your units than you would in Civ, which I think it simplifies it in a way where a player now knows that I don't have to create some special unit to do this specific thing. And experienced players have that flexibility where they're like, well, I can go over here and I can do any number of these things that I have in mind. I do have a strategic plan right now, but that could change immediately. And so I think that's going to be very, very good for the game's health long term. Now, another major difference that this game has from Civilization is how you end up winning the game. In Civ, there is a multitude of ways that you can win the game. You can have a science victory, you can have a military victory, you can have a culture victory, you can have a religion victory, etc., etc., etc. In this game, there's really only a fame victory, which is basically you get a score based on all of the different things you do, and that accumulation of a score is what gives you a victory. So it could be possible that you build up this massive army, destroy every other player on the map, but you still lose the game because your fame score was lower than another player's. And what this does is it stops some of the kind of cheese strategies that I think exist in other similar games, such as destroying other members early, though that could be, it's still viable in this game, but it's not as viable as it would be in, say, Civ, when you can just completely eliminate someone from the game by just brute forcing your way through their capital. But in this game, you are going to set yourself behind in a way if they're an especially weak opponent. If they are a strong opponent, then of course taking over their city and ransacking their outposts will be valuable. But in this game, I think it does eliminate some of those kind of cheesy ideas that people can get in other 4X games. Now, again, I don't have an extensive amount of experience with this game, so I could be completely wrong. And it's possible that the Spiffing Brit has already discovered some crazy strategy to win on turn 1. I don't know. That could be possible, but from what I can tell, this game kind of facilitates a competitive atmosphere a lot better than Civilization does. And I think overall, the game's flow is a lot better as well, because you can kind of sit back and plan out this whole strategy, or because you can kind of sit back, see where you're failing, even if you're not in first place. There's still tons of opportunities for you to eke your way ahead. In this game, there are catch-up strategies where as other players start going into new eras, it gives you stars towards that new era as well. So this means that no single person is just completely obliterated because of a bad start. It could mean that you are a little bit set back, but you're not as completely just caught off guard as you might be in Civilization, where if you get a bad start, you might as well just reset sometimes. So they've kind of addressed a lot of the problems that people would have with Civilization and a lot of the things that Civilization fell short on. Now, something I do want to touch on here is how the monetization for Civilization works and how I hope this game can break that trend. For Civ, I would say it's modeled after kind of this big EA-like umbrella where you buy the base game and then they release kind of add-on after add-on after add-on after add-on, and then by the time you're at the end lifetime of the game, you've spent about 5 times the original price just on add-ons. Now, what I hope that this game does is either doesn't require the purchase of add-ons whatsoever. That would be the best case scenario, but I understand that sometimes the development of these things can be more costly than you would think. And so then my second option would be that I hope that the add-ons that you can purchase have much more value than the add-ons you purchase for Civ. So I guess for what I would hope for this game would be that the add-ons only really include new civilizations for each era, because if they add other mechanics, it feels like they're kind of putting the mechanics that people purchased with the base game behind another paywall, and that feels bad. So I hope that they don't kind of do any mechanics or new gameplay behind the paywall. I hope it's strictly new civilizations for different eras that are put behind this paywall, if there is any at all. Again, best case scenario, they release updates to the game free of charge for the customer, but I understand that based on the model that other games in this genre go with, that's very unlikely. I also am kind of curious about what type of mods might be made for this game and how well this game kind of allows mods into its system. I haven't seen any, I haven't tried any out, but as many people know, for Civilization, its modding is almost a necessity in some ways to balance the game. So I hope that this game can find a way to balance itself where it doesn't require modding, but I also hope that it allows modding, because there are some things that players just have better ideas about, or sometimes developers can't implement themselves due to time restraints or capacity restraints. So I hope that 1, the game is balanced well, and 2, that the option for modding is available relatively easily within the game. And of course, there are plenty of things in this game that are completely different than Civ, but they're kind of in the details. For example, the way that civics work in this game aren't researched the way that you do in Civ, because in Civ, basically the civic trees are the same as the research trees. They just give you different things and they operate off of culture instead of science. In this game, you get ways to spend your influence, is what they call in this game. You get ways to spend that influence, and they usually give you scenarios with two options that you can spend it on. You can also use your influence to purchase the favor of, say, a city state, or you can use your gold to do that. And so in that sense, it uses influence in a much different way than Civ uses culture. And I think it is in a unique way, because for Civ, they basically just copied and pasted researching and science for culture. In this game, it feels like a completely separate system that actually changes the way the game works, because you have these different binaries in the game. For example, you have collectivism versus individualism, and based on what you choose to do on those civics, they move you one way or the other. And depending on which side you're on this kind of line, you get different bonuses. So it also offers a lot of different ways that people can approach the game, and it might change your decision later on depending on how far along this line you are one way or the other. So it feels good that they actually took the time to think of a new system that Civilization doesn't have, that Civ kind of honestly was a little bit lazy with. And I really think that this is a very, very, very strong contender to compete against the Civilization franchise. And in the long run, I could definitely see these games competing basically neck and neck, if not this game eking ahead. But of course, that depends on the kind of adoption of this game, whereas Civ is a very ingrained game already. It has a dedicated player base, it has a dedicated scene, and it doesn't necessarily need the influence of a ton of people to get it going because it's already established. For this game to kind of take off and compete against Civ, it really does need a huge surge in players and creators making content about it and learning about it and giving it an effort. So in my opinion, this game is amazing. It competes with Civ on basically every level, and in my opinion, exceeds Civ in a lot of ways. And I have nothing but good things to say about the game, honestly. The only problem I've had with the game so far is a little bit of performance issues, where it is a poor performing game as far as resources on your computer are concerned. But with some updates, hopefully that will be optimized. I hope that it's still playable on people with low-end systems, because honestly, this game shouldn't require that many resources. While it does look great, it shouldn't require as many resources as it's kind of sucking from my own computer. And I have an i7 and a 3060 Ti and 32 gigs of RAM. So if it's sucking a lot of power from my computer, I can't imagine what it's doing to some of your computers. But if you have a lower end computer, let me know if it runs for you. If it doesn't, I apologize. This game is absolutely fantastic. So it's a bit unfortunate that that would be the cause of you unable to play. But I do believe within the next few months, we should see some significant performance updates to the game itself. And that's basically my very first impressions of the game. Of course, I will continue to keep playing this game. And if I do find myself playing this game in either a long-term manner or a competitive manner, I will start releasing guides on my channel for it. It is a fantastic game, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I do. But that's basically all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing, because I do a lot of content like this. I do content for all types of games, but I especially like strategy games, whether that be real time or turn-based. I love them all. So, yep, that's all. Peace.